Welcome. Well, hello there. It is time for something else. I'm doing a little sort of deep dive into Woodwind, basically. First of all, in Return of the Jedi. So I thought I'd start at the first cue, and I've just sort of picked out little examples, and I'm going to do this with each cue. So they're going to be really short, basically, and hopefully sort of useful for you. So, because I always think wind is sometimes the last thing that sort of gets considered with this sort of type of music. Anyway, a lot of it is blended in this cue, by which I mean the woodwind doing something similar to what something else is doing. In other words, strings or brass or whatever. And it's rare that they're on their own, apart from the very last bit, actually. So we're dealing with blended orchestration as opposed to differentiated or separation of colour. So in the very first cue, we've got flutes with trumpets who are muted. So that produces a really nice sort of coloured sound, classic sort of pianissimo combination. The inversions are changed freely. So we're starting off in root position, second versions, first inversions, root position again. They're all augmented triads, which again is actually quite unusual, although given the fact that Starry Night is essentially hexatonic and augmented, it's not that surprising. But this first cue, he does that with first cues with lots of the films. So we then move on to bar 10. I've given sort of all of these things so you can sort of cross-reference everything as well. This time we're blended with flutes an octave above the trumpets and the trombones, which are both in unison. They're also both consort as well. Again, it colours the sound a little bit differently. It's just a standalone chord. Moving on to the next one, we've got another blended sound. So here the top note is, and I'm focusing on woodwind, so oboe 1 with violin 1. Second voice is oboe 2, clarinet 1 and violin 2A. In other words, the outside desk players of violin 2. The third voice is cor anglais, clarinet 2 and violin 2, the inside desk of violin 2s. Bass clarinet we don't have. We got bassoon 1 and violas, bassoon 2 and cello. So the whole desk, which is unusual actually, there. And then we've got contrabassoon, which is there with double bass A, in other words, the principal players, and then double bass B, the inside desks of double bass, although they're desked differently these days, so it depends upon the stage. But basically, that's what we've got. So another blended orchestration. This is slightly more differentiated in the sense that we've just got one contra, which is doing the pedal note, whereas all the other wind are doing sort of, digga-da-dum, digga-da-dum, bum, digga-da-dum, digga-da-dum, bum. And it's also worth pointing out that this type of configuration, by which I mean the upper stave here, where you might put if you're a pianist, put your thumb on the G, third finger on the E flat, and then fifth finger on the G as well. I've called that the Brahms voicing because it happens in Brahms a huge amount. And essentially what we've got is the melody is in voice 1, that's repeated an octave below, and then voice 2 is just a third, can be a major or minor third below whatever the melody note is. And it's just a way of thickening the chord dyadically so that you don't have all of those sort of weird sort of diminished triad problems that you might get, which can sound rather harsh, because if we have that, we're getting into problems. So it's better to less is more, basically, is the main thing. We're then into mid-register clarinet and bassoon 1, clarinet 2 and bassoon 2. Again, we've got dyads, but this time they're blended with violins, viola 1, cello 1. That's also quite unusual, actually, with a whole tremolo string section. So that's another special sound that's sort of worth bearing in mind. It's quite an interesting one there, which you might even find use of in virtually anything that you do when you've got trem strings. So the next blend is here a good example of woodwind blended with strings orchestration, block chordal harmony, but melody dominated. In other words, this bum da da dum bum is the melody, but everything else is just sort of harmony. I should point out that these are horns as well, which then sort of cut out. So here, oboe 1, violin 1, which is doing the tune. Then we've got clarinet 1 and violin 2A, clarinet 2 and violin 2B. So the, you know, typical blends that you always get. We've then got viola 1, viola 2, cello and double bass, which is a sort of classic combination really. But those are not repeated in any of the woodwind parts. So the woodwind are only really sort of doing that upper stave at this point. So it's sort of quite useful to see. You know, you might have sort of thought, well, why not bassoons over there? For whatever reason, it doesn't sort of quite work. We don't need them. The red notes that are added here is when some other instruments come in. So we have a slightly terraced dynamic effect because it's building up to a climactic point. So you add more voices when you want to sort of add to that, but then suddenly the bass cuts out. So it's a bit of a sort of red herring moment. Not quite sure what's going on screen at that point. But that's when the oboe 2 comes in because it's not playing in the very first part. And so we then got oboe 1, oboe 2, clarinet 1, clarinet 2. And they kind of change line freely as well. So they fill up the triad. So the things that are not in red are the strings. So they don't double those, which is also an interesting thing. So you'll get one instrument that sort of slightly stands out a little bit in the blend, which is, again, quite unusual, I would have thought. And then the very last two things here, we've got a sort of nice B-flat major, add sharp 11 really, at this point in bar 72, where we got trem strings, but also trilled flutes on the top voice, and then harp just picking out that first note as well, which is just sort of giving a little bit of a tack to the strings as well, which are also just divided. Those are just violin 2s. Another nice little sort of special device at that point. And then the very, very last bit is in this cue, when woodwind are not blended, they're generally sounded in unisons and octaves and that sort of thing as well. So here we got 3 octave layers, but we call that 2 octaves apart. And so we got piccolo, flute 1 and glock on the very first one. Then the majority of everything on the second voice, flute 2, oboe 1, oboe 2, clarinet 1. Third voice we got cor anglais, clarinet 2, and then the brass are doing this sort of, you know, like that. We've also got basses doing the rhythm as well as a military drum at that point. So that's just it for that cue. And it's a really good idea when you've got a score to just do this. You know, go through maybe, I don't know, a sort of Bruckner symphony or a Mahler symphony. Not the whole thing, obviously, but just maybe a few pages. And just sort of work out what are the purpose of these notes and why are they here? What are they actually doing orchestrationally? And you get sort of, you know, some nice little tidbits. You know, these sorts of things could be straight out of Ravel, as could that, for example. And this could be out of Brahms number 4, you know. So it's a sort of really interesting little study, which I will bring more to you of. I don't think that makes sense, but there'll be more of them in due course. And bye for now.